Hello, and welcome to this month's episode of The Assembly Line, an NES homebrew podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Kevin from Orab Games.
I'm Beau from Soul Goose Productions.
And we're here after a long hiatus to talk about homebrews. It's been some time, hasn't it, Beau?
Too long, but that's life.
Yes, it's life, and dear listeners, we do apologize. We did have such plans, let me tell you.
That's when you're in trouble, is when you actually have plans.
But what did we want to start touching on today, Beau?
This is going to sort of be our first episode in sort of a holiday series throughout the fall and early winter. And homebrews are interesting in that they often operate outside of normal, economic concerns. And so you can do things like a very holiday-specific game that, nobody's going to buy in July normally, but in the homebrew community, you can release it. And if you're only doing 50 copies, those are your 50 copies, and you're not out anything for sort of having fun with the holiday. And holidays and the homebrew sort of community kind of started pretty early on. One of the first games that was released in physical format was 8-Bit Christmas 2008. And it was just sort of a greeting. It was just basically a greeting cart, although that Greeting Carts is a different company that was started later. From there, Brian kept it up every year, and so there's been an 8-Bit Christmas every year since, up until this year, which was just released like 2 days ago, 2017.
So he's had the 8-Bit Christmases on the NES. I know there was a couple years he did the Super Nintendo, and I think there was there a Game Boy cartridge released at some point through someone else?
Oh, through someone else, yeah. ASM Retro did a couple Game Boy carts. Oh, ASM Retro also did the Heebie-Jeebie Halloween cart. Halloween and Christmas seem to be the two big ones that everybody likes, which, they're fun holidays. You can either dress up in crazy costumes and you sort of have that horror thing, or, it's Christmas and Santa and, all that.
And we can't forget the Holly Jolly NES mix.
Yeah, our friend Matt last year, Matt Pepler, did the Holly Jolly NES mix, and that was a musical chiptune album done by Human Thomas Clapone. I'm probably butchering that name too, but hey, what's new? Yeah, there's been quite a few homebrew games that are tied to holidays, just because. And, it's a festive time of year, I think. To me, that's why it happens. You've been involved with some of them. What do you think?
Yeah, I think there's just something sort of special about, getting into the holiday spirit. And when you can have some sort of physical item to help celebrate it, I think people get excited about that. So it's just something that people have sort of latched onto. And I think there's sort of equal excitement between the people that are actually, putting these things together and then the people that are sort of rushing out to get them when they're released.
Well, a lot of them, too, have been time limited. So there's always been games that are, done in runs of 50 or runs of 100. But a lot of the holiday ones have been done based on time, at least the retro USB ones. They're only available for like 2 months, once a year, and that's it. And so it's, you go out, you buy it, and you get to put something under the tree and then open it up, and it's a new game, and it's, it's interesting. I like it.
Yeah. Brian does a really cool thing when he puts the game out. It's usually late October, early November, and then he will just keep making them as long as you get your order in before. I think he cuts you off January 1st. Maybe it's a week before that. I'm not sure.
No, it's usually January 1st or December 31st, whichever.
Yeah.
And Kevin, our friend Kevbot, has started a Halloween series as well, his Scare Carts, which they're games designed to scare you. So without giving too much away, like that was the one that we were talking about last episode that Kevin and I did some work on. The screen pops up at some point that you don't know when, and it's designed to scare you. And it's not a game. Its purpose is to do that. And so you can't normally do that with a regular game. And so the holidays provide sort of an excuse to have some fun.
Yeah, and I actually got my start in the homebrew community working on this. I know when Brian from Retro USB started the 8-Bit Christmas cartridges, back then, with my musical background, he asked me to do some music. And for the first, I want to say 4 years, I was doing the music every year for the Christmas cartridge. And then it just sort of, when I transitioned into a programmer, it just became a little too much to keep up with. So I passed the torch over to Zai, our resident chiptune musician. Thomas, how do you pronounce his last name? Raganet?
I think it's Raganet.
But he's a much better musician than I am, so his music is definitely a step up. So I'm glad that that tradition is staying alive. And this year's Christmas cartridge is really cool. It's not a new game, but it's a compilation cartridge of a lot of the past. Is it 8 years?
9 years.
Wow.
So this is the 10th year.
And it has a label that will change depending on what game you're playing. It's an LCD screen where the label goes.
Halloween itself has attracted, even though 8-Bit Christmas is kind of the one that you look to when you think of holiday things because it's been going so long, Halloween has sort of attracted an equal following with the ones that we've mentioned, but then there's also, back in 2010, somewhere in there was a version of Seagull, which was the first game on the HBWC. There was a Halloween version of that. The Haunted Halloween games by the Retrotainment guys. We had Greg on a few episodes to talk about their new game, Full Quiet, but they have Haunted Halloween 85 and Haunted Halloween 86, which are very, themed beat-em-ups, they're great games. And yeah, it's interesting because when you think of it, trying to sell, a very specific game outside of the season it's intended for would normally be kind of a problem. But that's one of the nice things about making homebrew games and being free from some of those economic concerns.
Yeah, it's been interesting to see Halloween sort of become such a latched onto holiday for. I guess it's pretty easy to sort of develop characters that are very obviously, spooky. It's a little bit, easier to design stuff for that. And I think Halloween, itself just has sort of a personality that people are drawn to because, I don't know. People are getting more and more excited, it seems, about Halloween every year.
That's interesting you mentioned that because that's what got me into starting to look at doing Halloween games was when I was considering doing art myself, which types of characters would be easy to do, and doing Halloween, costumes and things like that was much easier than, knights in armor or vague sci-fi things. I could just look at, a picture of a kid in a ghost costume and then, figure out how I wanted to interpret that. And so I actually have some stuff sitting on a hard drive somewhere of like a RPG-like Halloween characters.
Yeah, I think it might be a little bit easier to design for Halloween because you don't have to sort of strive for not necessarily realism, but you can be a little bit more abstract with your ideas when you're going, designing a monster or a ghost or a skeleton. They're very sort of distinguishable, in itself.
Most of the more holiday-themed games have been group efforts, too, which has been interesting to watch. The Christmas games, usually somebody does programming, somebody does art, somebody else does publishing, somebody else does music. And I think a lot of the Halloween games have sort of followed suit with that. They're kind of team efforts, and a lot of them are, almost more for the community than for any other reason.
I think that's sort of a microcosm of the homebrew community in general. It's been interesting to watch, and maybe we can touch on this in a future episode. As things have progressed, originally it was these individual people sort of tackling most or all of these projects on their own. But as people have sort of, developed their strengths and developed relationships with one another, it's been really interesting to see, people sort of say, hey, I want to do this. How about, since you're good at this, maybe you can do the music and you can do the art. And it's sort of built this community in itself of people teaming up to sort of produce these projects that maybe wouldn't be as good if they were doing them on their own.
Well, I can say from experience they wouldn't be as fun without that sort of communal effort.
Yeah, both in development and in playing. Yeah, building something with other people, when you can sort of focus on an individual aspect of a project, it's very enjoyable being able to not feel overwhelmed. You know, you have a specific duty, but it's really fun sort of tossing ideas around, with people who are, you know, in this sort of passion project together with you.
Hey, holidays bring people together. Homebrews bring people together. It all works.
Absolutely.
So for this episode's game review, we are actually going to try something a little different. Kevin has made quite a few games. I have now almost finished one, and we were going to try to incorporate some of the stuff that we've done into the show in sort of a different manner, sort of switch things around. So we're actually going to have Tim from Orab Games on to sort of take my place in the process. And I'll be in the hot seat. So I'm going to hand it off to them, and I guess we'll see where this goes, because I have not peeked at the questions.
Tim, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Sweet. So we're talking about Spook-o-tron today, which Beau has been working on for a little bit of time. I think the idea for starting Spook-o-tron, now, of course, I don't know for sure, and we're going to ask him some specific questions in a minute, but we're going to get into a little bit of what I know of the history of it. We were in Maryland at MagFest back in 2015. Is it 2015, Beau?
2016.
2016? I don't know. Who knows? One of those years we were over there.
Yeah, no, 2016.
I guess it was the beginning of 2016. That's why it seems like so long ago.
Yeah.
But we were checking out the arcade, and there was a Robotron 2048 cabinet, and I think he had the idea of doing something with like a Virtual Boy controller before this, but I think when he saw this game and the way the dual sticks, you know, you move with one and shoot with the other, I think it sort of sparked a creative light bulb in his head, and he decided to sort of take Robotron and turn it into sort of a Halloween-themed arcade shooter. So that is what Spook-o-tron became. It's a pretty fun little arcade shooter. You're a beta tester, right, Tim?
Yeah, I actually got on pretty late to the beta testing. And
when did you come on the team?
I probably about the beginning of October, I think, of just this year. So I've only been on it for like 6 weeks, but I played through the game quite a bit already.
Did you do a lot of breaking?
You know what? The game was pretty solid by the time I got there. I only found really one hiccup in the game. The rest of it was, if he was happy with the design, there was just some things I found that I thought maybe they could be tweaked, but if they enjoyed them that way, then maybe that was the way it was meant to be.
Are you saying he's a better programmer than I am? I'm just kidding. I won't let you go there. So the gameplay of Spook-o-tron, can you describe to us, since you're such a beta tester, you know, what a basic gameplay is of this game?
Yeah, so with Spook-o-tron, what you have to do is, well, I had to use the two NES controllers. So you plug one into port 1 and one into port 2. You flip them bad boys sideways, and you get a little double-fisted action. And you run with the left joystick, and you shoot with the right joystick. So you just run around and try to shoot these enemies as they're just collapsing in on you, because he starts you right in the middle. And all the enemies are on the outside, and they just come flying in at you. And you have to move. You have to get out of there. One thing he did really well with this game is that he didn't just put random enemies everywhere and just have them come in. There's specific designs and themes to some of the levels, which I thought was really charming for the game and actually made for some really cool gameplay on some of the levels.
Yeah, and you described that you have to use two NES controllers turned sideways, and that's of course because, like the arcade game, you have full, 8-way movement with the left controller and then 8-way movement with the right controller. Yep. And the NES controller, by itself does not have the capabilities of doing that. So he did that, but then he took it a step further. And he developed it to where if you want to modify a Virtual Boy controller or a Super Nintendo controller, you can also use those to basically take the place of the two NES controllers.
Right, and I'm really excited to try those out. I haven't been able to do that yet, so hoping to get an adapter for that Super Nintendo controller and get one of the Virtual Boy controllers from him so I can play that. Yeah,
I attempted to modify a Virtual Boy controller on my own, and it went very badly, so I'm going to have to get someone to do that for me. It's probably hard for you to talk about the fun factor of the game since you're so close to it, but can you give us some sort of first impressions when you first started playing it?
So I'll go back to where I first saw this. I saw this year in April for the first time at Midwest Gaming Classic in Milwaukee. And when you walked into the Nintendo Age room, there sat this futuristic looking TV that looked like it came out of the 80s though. And this thing has like this red drop space helmet. So like you drop this shell over top of the TV and it turned the tube red. And then you played Spook-o-tron on it. It was really crazy. So that kind of added to the charm factor of playing it. But when I first picked it up, I didn't realize at the time until later that he had a couple of harder levels right off the bat in that demo there, and it was just kicking my butt. I looked at him and I'm like, there's no way I'm getting past level 3 in this game if you've released this. Well, come to find out, he did put some easier levels up front and moved those to the back end. So fast forward to October when he asked me to come on as a beta tester. I got the game and I plugged it in or put it in and I started playing it and I'm like, oh wow, I got to level 1 without dying. This is kind of neat. Okay, I kind of get what's going on now. And then the challenge, what made it fun was that you just don't run around and shoot all the time. There's certain directions and paths you want to figure out in this game, and you only have so many lives in the entire game. And then you gotta, I think it's every 10,000 you get an extra life. So you really gotta be careful not dying early or what I call dumb deaths, where you just run into something on accident where you shouldn't even done it, or you weren't paying attention to the left side and shooting right and something got you. But so that's what makes it interesting. You just don't run around and shoot. Sometimes you gotta figure out what's the pattern. I gotta go this way, shooting this way, and then up and shooting this way, and then over and shooting this way, and I beat the level. And it kind of takes you back to the old school NES, where if you mess up too many times, you've got to start over, and you got to keep track of your notes on these levels. So when you get there, you almost got to be ready with your notes, say this is what I got to do, and then perform it.
Yeah, there is some strategy involved. But speaking of levels, one thing that makes this game unique, and I don't even think we've mentioned yet that, Beau did a Kickstarter for this game, and it was successfully funded, and he reached out to all the backers, and he, said, hey, if you guys who helped make this game possible, if you want to submit levels, you can do so, and he basically sent everyone, the capability of designing their own levels and submitting them. So this game is sort of a compilation of many people's efforts in putting different levels together, right?
Yeah, it's really, really unique in that factor that he had his buyers actually make levels for the game. And being part of a team before with you, Kevin, on the incident, I know a couple levels that you needed, and I drew up, made it in there. When I get to those levels with my friends, I'm like, that's my level. I made that. It really adds to the game for these backers. So when they get these games and they recognize their level, they're just going to be, it's going to be outstanding for them.
Yeah, I think it's special to, as someone who's paying, their hard-earned money toward a game, to see part of themselves in that. It's really awesome. And when he decided to do this game, he reached out to me about doing some music for it. And I asked him, basically what he wanted. And he said he only wanted title screen music. He didn't want any music during the gameplay, because he thought that maybe it would be a little bit too much going on. Because it takes so much focus and effort to sort of keep track of all the enemies that are moving at you, because there are a lot of enemies. Mm-hmm. But what I want to do now is just play a little clip of the music that I did for the title screen. It's nothing too fancy, but he actually sent me a couple YouTube videos of examples of what he sort of had in mind, because I wasn't really sure when he said he was going to do it Halloween themed. I didn't know how Halloween-y he wanted it. But he sent me some examples, and I did my best to sort of take what he sent and turned into Nintendo music. So here is the title music from Spook-o-tron. right, so that was the title theme to Spook-o-tron. What we're going to do now, it's a little bit weird bringing Beau on since Beau is one of the co-hosts of this show, but
Welcome, Beau.
we're now going to bring Beau on, who's no stranger to podcasts, and ask him some questions about his baby that he's been working on for, how long have you been working on this game now, Beau?
Too long?
Doesn't it seem that way when you're working on a project?
It always seems that way.
I started it pretty much. So you'd mentioned that MagFest visit that we did, Kevin, and I ended up having surgery a few weeks later, and then was out for about a month, and then I started it probably in April of 20. Golly, that must have been 2015, right?
I don't know, man. It seems like so long ago.
No, it would have been April of 2016. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because that makes it a year and a half now. Okay, sorry.
No, that's fine. So tell us, Beau, what is your kind of your educational background? What did you study? Was it something with computers and programming?
No, I did degrees in religion. Oddly,
that's not programming.
No, that's not programming. Hebrew is a bit like programming, but
yeah, you know those foreign languages they'll get you. So what made you one day decide, hey, I want to make a video game on the NES platform, even though I have no idea what's going on here?
I've been wanting to make a game since probably right about the year after high school. I'd kind of discovered RPG Maker and had downloaded some files and was looking at things, and went off to college, and then you get busy with schoolwork and stuff, so I'd come back to it every 3 or 6 months or every year. And that went on for about a decade, and I'd try different things during the summers. I'd try to do like Game Boy Advance programming, or everybody said, oh, you have to know C, so I'd sit down and try to learn whatever C was, and I never get very far.
Yep.
And then back in 2013, I sort of decided, it would have been early 2013, I decided that I was either going to learn or I was just going to give up the dream that I'd had for a decade, and I just kind of started down the path.
Well, we're glad that you did not give up on it.
Yeah, well, there was a lot of supportive people along the way in the community, and that made a difference. That's why I chose to do the NES versus Super Nintendo or Game Boy or Genesis.
So now that you are a video game programmer, do you find that you are actually playing games more or less?
Well, I don't think I'm ever going to consider myself a game programmer, but I still don't consider myself a glasses wearer either 20 years later. But when I started learning NES programming, I started going back and replaying a lot of stuff and analyzing it for, what they were doing in terms of like effects and whatnot, and then also graphics a lot. And those are sort of, I don't know much about music. So those two areas, I've just gone back and replayed a ton of stuff. And then with design, that mostly comes from Super Nintendo things, so I've been playing a lot of that as well.
Now that you're not playing video games as much just for fun, what was your favorite game style and on what system?
Oh, always RPGs and always Super Nintendo.
And then you decided, I'm going to program from the Nintendo instead? I mean, that's kind of crazy.
Super Nintendo didn't have a community, well, still really doesn't have a strong community like the NES does, and I figured it'd be easier to start with the NES and move to the Super, but yeah, I'm kind of happy with the NES and we'll probably never leave at this point.
Why do you like RPGs? They're so dumb and boring. I'm just kidding.
Go back to your sports games.
I know how you like to label RPGs with a letter, like JRPG is Japanese RPG, SRPG is strategy RPG. Is there such thing as BRPG? Because they're boring RPGs.
Oh, you've been waiting like years to get that one out, haven't you?
Absolutely.
What was the question?
There was no question.
Gotcha.
So let's get into your game programming a little bit here. Even though you have produced other games such as Swords and Runes and Zero to X, is Spook-o-tron the first game that you've actually programmed, or have you done something before this?
Well, I spent a couple years on Zelda-like, and then I sort of fluctuated between some other projects, including Family Vacation, sort of an Oregon Trail one. That's that was sort of the first official one that I announced, and then ended up doing Spook-o-tron as sort of the mini game contained within that, and then it just got really out of hand. But I actually redid all the programming in 0 to X before it could be released, because I wanted to add some features and stuff. So the core was done by another fellow, but then everything around it, from the title screen to the high scores to the flash saves, like all of that was I kind of had to do, and then also rewrite all of his code for a different assembler.
Gotcha.
So that's sort of officially my first one, but not really. I don't count it.
I know that when you were first starting to learn, you were working on sort of a port of Adventure for the 2600. Is there? Are you ever going to go back and finish that?
Oh, I almost forgot about that. Yeah, that was one I used to ask you questions about. And probably not. I never grew up playing Adventure. Like, the first time I played it was when I first decided that I wanted to program it or port it. And I just did that because it was sort of like Zelda Light, at least in terms of, how it looked.
Yeah, you were just sort of figuring out the different room programming stuff, right?
I have no interest in actually playing the game because I've never actually really played it.
On to some Spook-o-tron questions here now. What was your inspiration behind Spook-o-tron? Kevin and I kind of touched on this before you got on the show here, but we want to kind of hear from you what your inspiration was.
It was mostly motivated by two things. One was the desire to pick a project that had as many sprites on screen as possible, because I'd started off with the Adventure port and the Zelda likes. I was really focused on backgrounds and could never really figure out how to work with sprites, and so I couldn't think of a more sprite-intensive game than Robotron, with, just enemies coming at you from all directions and bullets, and you're shooting and running and obstacles and everything in between. So that sort of stuck out to me. And then also, I sort of wanted to find something that you could use the Virtual Boy controller to play with. And there's not a lot of games that use dual joysticks, and Robotron is, of course, the big one that people look to. But I hadn't really ever played that either, so I just sort of took some of the core concepts and then kind of made my own game out of them.
Now, back at MagFest in early 2016, is it true that you would sort of lurk behind people and stalk them when they were playing Robotron, and then swarm them afterward and ask them questions about their playing experience?
I don't remember asking them questions. That was the guy I creeped out in Portland. But no, I'd sit there and just watch them play and see what they were doing and see how far they could get and see what. Oh no, I did ask him. You're right, because I asked him what made it fun.
Yes.
Because I couldn't understand it. Like, you die in Robotron, you die almost immediately. Like, you're only playing for 30 seconds usually tops. And why did people keep coming back? And the same, like, 3 or 4 people, old timers some of them were working the show, long white beards, and they were just, they were making love to that machine. They were throwing it all over the ground. It was sliding back and forth, and they were just hammering it and loving it. And it was just the strangest thing to me. Like, what made it so addicting? Because I hadn't really played it much. And
was it the challenge? Was that the biggest answer?
I don't know. I've heard, because I've done some reading since then about why people like it, because it's often regarded as one of the best arcade games ever. And a lot of people speak of this almost zen-like moment where they get into this mode and suddenly everything is just falling before them, and they can go, whole minutes or 10 minutes, 50 levels, and just blow through everything. But once you lose that, it's over, and you just, you're done right then and there.
Yep.
Yeah, it does seem like you can get on this streak of just sort of, you don't know how you're not dying, but somehow you're just seeing paths open up.
So I got to play this for the first time at Midwest Gaming Classic, as I was saying earlier, and for a game that I'm not really much into, even though I'm an arcade kind of player, mainly because you die a lot in the game, that frustrates me, but it is a lot of fun. As I got to testing it, I starting from an easier level going on, I really got into it and got into the strategy of it. Can you tell us a little bit about the gameplay from the programming aspect?
In terms of
how it works to as you program it to make everything move on the screen and kind of play nice with each other.
Yeah, so
you can answer in any way you want.
If it's too complicated of a question, that's fine. But This is an assembly line podcast.
Yeah, so Spook-o-tron was my attempt to learn how to work with sprites, and I started basically with just the hero and got the 8 directions moving, and then I think I did enemies next, because what I would do is I'd build the hero routines and then I would adapt them for the enemies, and then figuring out how to like do autonomous movement was sort of new to me. And so once I got through that, then I had one hero and he could move around, he couldn't do much, and then enemies that would spawn on the screen, and then from there I added projectiles and deaths, and then I started adding different types of enemies, because for the longest time it was just the pumpkins. Things would just like come at you. I never intended for the game to be as big as it was. It was just supposed to be a family vacation mini game where you would die almost instantly, so it would eat your quarters in the game. And yeah, so it was just pumpkins and no projectiles from the enemies, and the hero could shoot, and that was it. And I think that was what I sent. I sent Kevin the first copy that I'd done, because nobody knew that I was back to work and working on things, and I sort of secretly sent this to him, and that took about 3 weeks to just get the basic movements down. And then after that, I showed it to a couple other people, and they got pretty excited, and so I started adding more stuff with different enemies, and the enemy projectiles really threw me for a loop, just because of how to keep track of them all. So it's limited to. So there are certain limitations in the game because of that. Like originally you could have 8 player projectiles, but then for CPU time I cut it down to 6, and then there's 8 enemies that can shoot projectiles. There's 32 enemies. There's 8 civilians that can be picked up and that can also be killed by enemies. And I think that's it. It's interesting because when you go to the level editor, you can see some of the programming from the backside if you go to build a level, because like the first 8 slots have to be, or if you're using a projectile enemy, it has to be within the first 8 slots. If you choose random, you cannot use certain things like projectile enemies because they could appear outside of those 8 slots. Or you can't use, what's the other one with random? It's ghosts. You can't use the random shift, because they'll shift a invincible enemy into an enemy slot, that type of thing.
You snuck something in there on me that I didn't know. This was a mini game for another game?
Yeah, I needed... So, like, Family Vacation is kind of a loose adaptation of the Oregon Trail, and to fill that sort of hunting section, I decided to have the player go to arcades, and they could win tickets, and they could, buy food with the ticket.
Interesting.
And
I did not know this.
I'm not a big arcade game player, and so most of them, like when I go to play them, they last too long. They don't ever eat my quarters because I don't ever put a quarter in the first place. And so I needed something that would kill the player real fast and consistently, and that also had a lot of randomness to it. So the original design of Spook-o-tron is for everything to be random almost all the time. And it was only later when the testers started to want to be able to place things in specific locations that I went back and then added in the ability to not have it be random.
Very cool. I had no idea.
So I know that you didn't do a lot of the art, and what makes this game really charming is the art. It has a nice, charming look to it, and I think someone named Chris Cacciatore did it for you. Do you know what sort of influences he used or had for the art direction of the game, and what sort of influences did you have for like the packaging and just the whole look that you were going for?
Well, I had something very different in mind when I was sort of contemplating doing the art myself. But then when I reached out to Chris, he had done at the time, now he's doing actual homebrew programming, but at the time he had just been posting art that he'd been working on Twitter. And so I sort of found him through that. And he sent me back this sheet of like these really like cute, for lack of a better word, cute little tiny pixel sprites, because that was my requirement, was that they had to be real small. And I looked at him and I was like, I don't know, like this isn't quite what I had in mind. And then the more I looked at it, I don't know how many times that day. And by the end of the day, I was like, no, this is definitely it. Like, this is just awesome. And they were just so cute, I guess, for lack of a better word, and they all worked well with the colors. Like, he observed all the restrictions I needed, and he had a good cast in there. And, I said I'd need a werewolf, and it came back, he used 3 colors, and it looked perfect. And yeah, so I'm not actually quite sure what his influences are or were for it, other than some like sort of vague restrictions that I gave him, and then just his own kind of cute pixel style. He's done a lot of Game Boy Color stuff is probably what I've noticed to be one of his biggest influences.
And your wife did the box art, right?
Oh yeah, and so yeah, for the actual box art, my wife had started, Elise, she had started doing some chalk art and things like that. And I was like, hey, do you want to do some art for me? And she always claims that she has no imagination. So I pulled together some images I found offline and sort of put them onto a sheet and was like, can you make something that sort of looks about like this? And it had a little guy and then, a castle and kind of a tree. And then she just sort of went to town with her own little style and put it all together, and she drew it out with chalk markers, and we took a couple different sheets that she'd done and combined them, and then I sent it to Kevin here, and he turned it into the final box art.
Yeah, it turned out really nice.
And then I tried to redo that for the title screen, because Chris did the all the sprites and everything, but then like the title screen, and that's pretty much it. I think I'm responsible for. So the good stuff is Chris's, and then the stuff is me. But yeah, so it's got like a kind of a fun, and we tried to capture too, sort of a spooky font with a Halloween font for spook, and then the O is sort of generic. It's just a big O, and then the Tron is sort of in an 80s sort of dot matrix looking computer font.
Yeah, it kind of looks like it's a tribute to the Robotron or something.
Yeah, it probably is somewhere in there. I mean, there were quite a few fonts that sort of looked like that.
So the one thing that's unique about this game is that it uses it can use a modified Virtual Boy controller or a Super Nintendo controller. Obviously, neither of these were made for the Nintendo. So what was the greatest challenge of designing a controller to work on the NES?
So we've known for a number of years that Super Nintendo controllers would work on the NES, but nobody had really used the Virtual Boy controller for a homebrew project. I found a link or two that described how to wire it up to work on an NES, but down was B and left was A. And so with that, seeing that, I realized that if it was registering those buttons, then chances are it was going to register all the other buttons too. And if you actually designed the game from scratch, then you could design it to take advantage of that. Because it's not very fun to play with down and left for A and B. They'd actually found a way to... so what had happened was they'd found a way to bridge the gaps over to A and B and make them work like a standard controller. And that meant that then down and left and A and B, they were all registering at some point. So what I did was I took a controller and a bunch of jumper wires and wired it up to a Nintendo, and then I created a little test program that told me which button sort of registered in the set of routines. Because it's so like the Super Nintendo, to use that, you read the controller 16 times instead of just 8. It's the same. It's the player 3 port. So if you were using like the 4 score, that's how player 3 information comes in. It comes on those last 8 of player 1. And so I just read the controller 14 times because there's 14 buttons, and figured out which was which, and then designed the game kind of around that.
It's crazy that you pulled it off. I remember back when you started sort of, putting out feelers to see if it was going to be a possibility, and you were asking people, if it was going to, if you were going to be able to pull it off of actually getting this controller to work. I thought that you were crazy. I think I even told you that there's just no way it's going to work.
I didn't want to tell anybody, so when I was trying to find information on it, I was asking Brian, Bunny Boy, but I wouldn't tell him what I was actually doing, so I would ask him questions about the Super Nintendo and secretly then make it work for the Virtual Boy controller. I like my secrets.
Well, I mentioned earlier that I tried to modify my own Virtual Boy controller and was just stupid about it and messed it up. But
what'd you do?
I don't really want to get into that because there are a few people that might still have respect for me out there. But anyway, for the other morons out there in the world, is there going to be a way to like you're going to like offer pre-modified controllers for people to purchase if they can't do it themselves?
Oh yeah, so one of the things with this project was I was real secretive about it because I didn't want anybody else to sort of beat me to the punch and like steal that thunder, and I like developing something and then just dropping it on people. But part of that was if I was gonna make the Virtual Boy controller thing happen, I had to buy up a bunch before, other people started buying them up. Otherwise I wouldn't be able to offer them to people when the time came. And so I bought up a good number. And yeah, I'll be selling those pre-modified for people to use.
So you use Kickstarter as a platform to promote and fund the game. Can you tell us about that process and if you would recommend it for anybody else in the future, or was there some challenges with it?
Kickstarter was actually really easy to use. I finished the game, like the core of the game was done in January and February of this year. And it was Halloween themed. So it was like, well, what do I do with a Halloween game in, February? And so that's why I started to look into Kickstarter because, to me, it was an arcade game and I didn't really want to go that route and make it bigger than, it should have been. But then throughout the Kickstarter process, they sort of kept growing. It was like, well, let's put 100 levels in, let's add some backer support. And I wanted to find ways. Kickstarter I've funded a lot of projects through Kickstarter, and there's some that are just, give me some money.
You funded a lot or backed a lot?
Okay. I've backed a lot of projects through Kickstarter over the years, and as a backer, it's always been interesting to see that difference between, just handing somebody money and then getting a game a year or two later, or
3,
handing them some money and then being able to have some say in what happens. And so the level editor, which I built for the testers and myself to be able to build levels faster, ended up being sort of one of my reasons for going the Kickstarter route, because it let other people, it opened up that process to hundreds of people, well, hundred-something people, and they could, have some say in what the actual game consisted of. Because the testing process had kind of opened that up a lot with different designs coming in. And actually, some of the enemies are thanks to different testers who said, one of the testers, Tanya, she wanted stationary blocks. And so I put in stationary blocks, though I'd never intended to, and really fought her for the longest time on it. But so yeah, Kickstarter as a platform, it was really nice to use because it allowed for a more user-created game, but also the funds up front to sort of make that happen. And it was a nerve-wracking 30 days, though, I'll give you that. Like, you're sitting there watching, you're updating all day, every day, just like, I don't like to be online that much, so it was...
And that was going on during the Midwest Gaming Classic, and I kind of remember you being on edge a little bit about that, and you even mentioned that you didn't like the anticipation of it.
Yeah, well, I set the funding pretty low since the game was mostly done. It doesn't seem like it was done because it's now been 6 months and it's on the verge of being released now. But the programming of the core, I don't think I've changed anything in the last almost year, and it had by the MGC it had already passed that. But just because you set the funding low doesn't mean you're not hoping for more. Right. And what if some people back out? And so like we ended up crossing a stretch goal right at the very last 30 minutes. Somebody pushed it over a considerable amount, and then 2 weeks later when I got the bill, 2 people hadn't paid, and suddenly it was down like $600-700, and it was like, geez, like that's rough. And then with stretch goals you end up giving stuff away for free, so it's like I'm giving stuff away for free, but yet I don't have all the funds that sort of were there to make that happen, and backers don't see that, and it doesn't show people that back out, and so it's that was sort of rough. But
so you mentioned that it's gearing up for release. I know you're going to be sort of fulfilling these orders pretty soon, but once you have fulfilled all the Kickstarter backers' orders, where can someone purchase Spook-o-tron who maybe wasn't there for the Kickstarter, and are there going to be any sort of editions of the game that are new that weren't part of the campaign?
That was one of the weirdest things to me with the Kickstarter process. Was for 30 days you're sitting there and it's your life basically. You're watching it all day every day, and then a week after the campaign ends, you get people popping up that are like, "Hey, I've never heard of this. Can I still get a copy?" You're like, "How have you not heard of it? It's everything. There's nothing else in the world." And so, yeah, over the last like 6 to 9 months, I guess it is almost 9. There's been quite a few people who have asked about sort of a regular edition, and I wasn't going to do one originally, but I'd sort of left myself the option. And one of the things that I chose to do was to make the level editor exclusive to that campaign. So when I go to do the regular edition, it will not have the level editor in it, because I want to sort of respect the people who, and honor their support, the people who backed it ahead of time. Like, I want them to get something special. I can't stand when projects end up giving away the more special things after the fact. It's like, well, we're the ones who helped you get it there. Like, give us something. Like, show your gratitude in some way, and then, the next guy down the line gets something, twice as good. And so I didn't want to do that. I wanted to really honor the backers' commitments. And the only exception to that is, so like there's the Kickstarter edition, which is a CIB standard NES box, and that has the level editor in it. Then there's also something that I have done over the years. It's called the numbered addition. So NA, numbered addition, edition. Because you end up adding to it, and I only ever do 100 of those. And if you have the previous one, you can get sort of the same number. So somebody will have all 7s or all 60s or whatever. And I always give them a chance to sort of secure their copy before I offer it up to other people. The Kickstarter was sort of the exception to that, and those come in sort of a special box. They come with a Virtual Boy back piece. I 3D printed little back pieces that slot into the battery pack slot, and then it's got a few little other bells and whistles with it. And any of the unsold ones, those also have the level editor, but any of the unsold ones will still be available for the general public until they're gone. And then that's sort of it for the level editor. And then the regular edition will have different artwork, and then be a CIB and have a no level editor.
You have yet to say where someone can buy this game.
Oh, I have a website, believe it or not. I don't go there very often, but it's soulgooseproductions.com. I need to start a pre-sale, I guess. I suppose it's time now. Like, I'm building the Kickstarter stuff. The last 2 weeks I've spent putting stuff together, and it's, I'm getting ready to flash the final version of the game and ship them out.
Awesome.
Nice. So I'm going to go a little off script here, and I'm going to ask you, what are your feelings on printers?
Yeah. That has been the hardest part of this project. Has not been the game itself. I mean, because that code is funny. You can always change something, and there's really no repercussions unless you really break something, but you can always go back to an earlier build. But when, in terms of physical materials, that has been the biggest holdup. So, like, the game could have been released months ago, but printers, man. And one company in particular, who I will not name, but man, they have been just terrible. So a couple weeks ago, I ended up finding a printer in a mall parking lot, one of those nice Craigslist deals, and sort of rebuilt it. And now I finally have a working printer. But the stuff that was actually printed off, I had to have a friend, Aaron E. He helped me out. Like, he printed a bunch of it. I got a few things from my first batch that didn't look terrible, so I went with those. And yeah, physical production, it is a drag.
So with your Kickstarter, what was your original date that you wanted to get these released, and have you been able to meet that?
Well, no, I missed it it was supposed to be out in October, and now it's November. And I hated missing that.
You have good reason, though, right?
Well, there's, besides production things, there's been a few life things. My wife got a job in a different state. I had to pack up the house and move it. I was in Portland for 2 weeks for the Portland Retro Gaming Expo and visiting family, and just sort of everything fell at the wrong time. We'd been looking for a house and a job for her back in the summer, and it took 3 months. And of course, she got the job 2 weeks before we needed to leave for Portland, and like the week that I was supposed to have everything done, and then printers are crapping out on me, and the die cutter that I needed showed up dead on arrival, and thing after thing. So yeah, I've missed the deadline a bit. It's still going to be out this fall. It is pretty much ready to go. I just don't want to. I want to be able to release everything at once. And with this project, there's been a lot of little pieces. Like Memblers, he did the controller adapters for me. There's 3D printer pieces that I have to like print off. There's some other things. And so putting together sort of the big package is difficult.
As far as missing deadlines go, 1 month is not too bad.
Yeah, but you don't want to set that precedent for yourself. It's like, oh, my first project I'm 1 month, the next project I'm 3 months. And it's like, no. Let's try to be on time. And I've backed enough things over the years that have still not come out that you want to try to hit that deadline, I guess.
Have you gotten any nasty grams from people pissed off that it isn't there yet?
Surprisingly, no. So like I updated I have not been real great with the Kickstarter updates because, I know what I'm doing all day long. I just figure everybody else does too. And I got a couple people in the beginning of October like, hey, when's this going to be out? Hey, is it going to be here by Halloween? And so I sort of sent one in mid-October that was like, it's probably not going to be done because I'm in a different state and I'm not even near my stuff. And since then, not one person's asked. And now I feel really bad. Like when they don't ask and don't complain, you feel even worse. So I've been waiting for this episode to come out to sort of update them so that hopefully all of those wonderful backers who may or may not be listening, they've been so patient, and thank you for your support. And this is what's been happening with the project. All
right. So we've got all the hard questions out of the way now. We're going to move on to more fun questions. Some of these we've asked to the various people we've had on the show, and some of them are brand new fun questions.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. So we're going to start with the easy one. What is your favorite homebrew of all time?
Oh, man. See, that's a tough one. Haven't I answered that on previous episodes?
Who cares? Answer it again.
Oh. Well, I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about my favorite one yet. It's not out yet. There has been a game that I've been testing for somebody that is, I will call it, pretty much the best homebrew game ever made. It's amazing. And we will have an episode about that very soon.
So the answer is not QuestForge?
No, QuestForge is up there. It's like within the top 5. Rob's Mad Wizard's up there. That's probably like number 2. Brad Smith's Lizard demo, that's up there at like number 1 or number 2, maybe number 3. And that's just the demo. I really like that demo. It's very good.
I guess that's a suitable answer.
Yeah. I don't know. I probably shouldn't talk about the one at all, but it's hard. So tease.
So who is your favorite homebrewer of all time?
Oh man, these are tough questions. I did not pick out.
These are the easy ones.
I did not pick out these questions to ask people. These are Kevin. He makes them make tough decisions. I just let them make broad, sweeping decisions. Favorite homebrewer is hard. There's a lot of people that I respect in the community, and a lot of people who have done a lot of things for the community. Rob he's put out so many high quality games that it's easy to respect him for just the professionalism that he brings to everything. And there's people like Kevin and Brian, Retro USB Brian, who have taken the time to teach others and help them along their way. And I would not be doing this without their help. And Michael Swanson as well, MRN. He really took a lot of time with me once I transitioned from the Nerdy Nights and Kevin's help to sort of broader stuff. And I don't know, it's tough. Oh, and in terms of games, people like Morphcat, he did the Super Bat Puncher demo. Like when I think of homebrew, those are the names I think of. These people that have done just some amazing work. Derek from Gradual Games, and I'm going to leave a whole bunch of people out. I'm trying to cover all my bases because that's a really bad question.
I think you stepped around it really well.
Yeah. And I feel bad because a lot of the people who are sort of the ones that have figured out all the stuff back in the day, I don't think they get a lot of love. So we got to give props to the OGs like Memblers who were there from the start, paving
people like
the way.
Joe, though, that like I talk to all the time, that I forget to even mention him because he's so close. A lot of these people I talk to on such a regular basis, and they've all sort of come down off their pedestals. When I started homebrewing and looking into things and learning, it was like, oh, these big names. And then, you meet them and it's the guy sleeping on the floor of your hotel room, or, this random person you meet at a game store who's like, can I give you a hug? And I'm like,
oh, that was me. That was definitely me.
That's weird, but all right, let's do it. And, or like Brian, who, just this Hawaiian shirt dude. And you're like, okay. Or then you get people out of the blue that you've never heard of, like Greg and Zach and Thomas.
Tim, yeah.
No, Thomas, their music guy. Oh, and Tim, too. But they just appeared in Portland one day with a fully finished game, and you were like, this is awesome. Who are you guys? And they turn out to be really awesome guys to hang out with and like talk to. And so it's, you have the original guys, and I'm not an original home brewer. I didn't start until 2013, which to me at the time was like, oh, this is old news already. This has been going on for 8 years. Like, everything's already been done. I'm just going to try to have some fun here, and not realize that like when I got into it was sort of a peak time when a lot of people were getting into it, and some of the best was still yet to come, which was shocking to me.
Oh yeah, and I'd say is still to come, because there's some awesome looking stuff that's sort of coming out soon.
Oh yes.
All right, so I said those questions were easy, but this one's going to be really easy for you. What is your favorite episode of Seinfeld?
Oh no, see that? What's wrong with you? I really like the engagement when George is sitting there contemplating life. They have the pact. We're not men. No, we're not men. It's just, I like that one.
We had a pact. All right. Well, that's all we got. You got anything more, Tim, or anything more you want to say, Beau?
I'm good over here. Thanks for having me on. This was a lot of fun.
Hey, thank you for coming on and doing the hard work. It's been sort of weird to figure out how to incorporate full sort of reviews and analyses of our own work, and you've been great with that. And it's been,
well, it's nice to be on this side of the hot seat for once.
It's kind of fun, isn't it?
It's less hot.
It is.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You just make it up as you go along.
That's all there is to making games. Just making it up as we go along. All right. Well, Beau, I think you did so well that I'll have you on for the rest of the episode. What do you say?
Oh, thank you, Kevin. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Tim. We'll see you again soon.
Yep. Thanks, guys.
All right. So every episode, we ask you guys to write in some questions. They can be good questions, bad questions. We don't care. We just like getting some feedback and sort of seeing what's on your brain. And this time we got a question from Adam Goulet. And the question was... Oh, I lost the question. Basically, the question was, if we were stranded on a desert island and you could only pick 3 games from the NES, what would they be and why? And I'm going to sort of annotate this question and require us to both... 2 of the games can be from the NES's lifespan, either licensed or unlicensed. But the 3rd game, I'm going to require that it be an aftermarket game, so it can either be a homebrew or a hack. Yeah, so do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
You can go ahead. I've talked a lot this episode. I do apologize.
Don't ever apologize, Beau. I love hearing you talk and chiming in with 3 words here and there. So I think I'm going to go with my first game being, and this might be sort of trite, but I'm going to pick Super Mario 3.
Really?
For 2 reasons. Well, for a lot of reasons, but I think the main reason is it's a longer game if you don't take any warps. So I think, when you're stranded on this island, you have lots of time to think about life and sort of, you got nothing but time on your hands. So for Super Mario 3, you would have lots of worlds to play through, lots of levels in the worlds, and they're also sort of diverse that I don't think it would get old quickly. And I know that I've played through the game, hundreds of times in my life, but there aren't many times that I've actually gone through every world. And honestly, I don't even think I've ever beaten World 7. Those plants are tough. But I think it would be a good sort of challenge and just fun to play through, a long sort of leisurely play. You don't agree with Super Mario 3?
I don't know. I'm not good at platformers. You know that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for my second game, I'm going to pick a game that has started to get some love.
Oh no.
The past couple years, but what?
I think I know what it is.
No, I don't think you do. I'm going to pick Friday the 13th.
Not Space Shuttle Project?
No, I actually considered Space Shuttle Project, but all of the levels in Space Shuttle Project are, I don't know, there is some diversity to it, but a lot of the levels are the same. And that's funny that I'm saying that because on Friday the 13th, it's a pretty quick game when you know what you're doing, but there's something about this game that I can't get tired of it. The sound effects are kind of annoying, the music, but it's so different every time you play it that I think I would get a lot of enjoyment out of it, and I do. Every year I play through it. I didn't get to do it this year for Halloween. I try to every year, but with all my vacation stuff going on, I didn't have the time. But man, that game's so fun. So that's my second choice. And then for my third choice, which has to be a homebrew or an aftermarket game of some type, I'm going to pick The Legend of Zelda Randomizer, because if I didn't pick it, Legend of Zelda would be one of my two, licensed games that I'd pick. But since I know that game forwards and backwards, I think I'd get tired of it. And with the randomizer, it sort of places all the items randomly in the world, and every time's different. So I think that I could play that forever, and it would always be a challenge because you would constantly be sort of trying to burn down every bush and bomb every wall, and you just never know where anything is. So I think that would be a lot of fun. So, Beau, I'm going to pass the question to you.
I don't know how, but I completely spaced Legend of Zelda when you mentioned the question, and I'm going to have to throw that down. That'd be the one. Definitely taking that. I still have yet to play. For a while I was playing through like every year, and just it's one of those games that makes me want to make games and want to make better games. And just the design of it is so good. I would definitely take that. And the graphics are so simplistic, and the music is so limited, but you never get tired of seeing them or hearing them. So
nope.
I would definitely take Zelda. Oh, and I have yet to ever play the Master Quest, so that'd be sort of fun to eventually get to one of these days. Legacy of the Wizard is another one that I would pick. It's a game that my cousin gave me. I think I have the picture right here, which you can't see, but gave it to me in 4th or 5th grade. It was, I think he'd gotten a Super Nintendo, or his mom had told him that he'd get a new game if he gave us one of his old ones. So I got Legacy of the Wizard in box and everything, and I've never beaten it other than with cheating once. And it's just one of those games that I can continually pick up and play and not finish, and always want to play a little more, but then get stuck and I can't finish it. And just the brokenness of it is what makes it fun for me. Getting to those spots that you're not supposed to get to and things like that.
Huh.
Yeah. Oh man, I could play that all the time. I need to give it another run this year. And then for homebrews, I'm not quite certain. I hate to mention it again, but Lizard is up there as probably one of my favorites. The release will, sort of solidify or destroy whether that is the case. But yeah, I don't know. That's and the fact that it's all done by one person to me is interesting, even though I end up usually working with other people for different parts of projects. I like the idea of being able to do everything yourself. And it's one of those games like Legacy of the Wizard, which is probably why I like it, where you're not like in a hurry. Mario and all that always had a timer and a time limit, or things jumping out and trying to kill you, or, enemies scrolling on and attacking you. But Legacy of the Wizard's very laid back. You can just sort of explore at your leisure, kind of like the later Metroids. The first one I'm not a huge fan of. But, yeah. So Lizard is up there.
Huh, those are good answers.
Different, probably, but
yeah,
that's okay.
Yeah, well, I think that this question was good because I think it gave listeners maybe a little bit different side of our personality that they typically get to hear. So as always, if you have a question that you want to write in, you can write us at our email address at nesassemblyline@gmail.com. And we will read them and ask them and answer them on a future episode. And if email is not your style, of course, you can contact us many ways, Nintendo Age personal messages, write us at Twitter. I'm at A Ton of Glaciers. Beau is at Soulgoose.
I'm on Nestev too. You can always get a hold of me on Nestev.
You can get a hold of Beau on Nestev. I will never go back there again because it scares me. But it's a great place for very smart people, which I am not one of. And, yep, so that's it there.
Well, it has been a busy fall, that is for sure. Even, between life and all these other things. But one of the biggest and most enjoyable parts of the fall was the Portland Retro Gaming Expo.
Yeah, I mean, it's always really sort of, it's awesome in itself because, you're surrounded by retro gaming enthusiasts. But as a developer, it's also incredible because you sort of get reconnected to, seeing close friends who you've, developed friendships with over the past few years. And it sort of recharges you as far as like an enthusiasm level and just wanting to get back and create, just for the sake of creating because you're surrounded by people who just love it as much as you do.
And this year's Portland was great with just the sheer amount of people that were there.
Yeah.
Well, you, of course. Tim was there. Jason, who does some retro USB support stuff. Brian, retro USB himself. Sergio was there. He's done music for some games. Did we just did feature one of his? Oh yeah.
Yes.
His Moon track. Or your DuckTales theme, right, Kevin?
Yes, the DuckTales theme. I definitely got a few emails on that title.
Did you really?
Yeah, people.
They know their
people
stuff.
are passionate about being accurate, and to me, it's the DuckTales theme, but that's not its proper name, I guess. The Haunted Halloween guys, of course.
Yeah. So Greg and Tim, different Tim, and Zach, the artist, they were all there. Chris goes by Optimon online. He was working on Pyronaut, and then he had his homebrew game Raleigh there, which was sort of available to check out and play.
And we had a couple listeners that popped up, didn't we?
Oh, well, no, I mean, yeah, I think they all listen, but no, Nathan Tolbert was there. And then, I was really surprised, standing there, and this guy came up to me, and he was like, "Hey, do you want to check out what I've done?" And I was like, "Huh?" He was like, "I make games for the NES and the Game Boy," and I was like, "Oh, okay, sure. Like, this is random, because I tend to try to keep up and keep track of most people." And it was interesting. It was he goes by PSC online, and he was doing a Mario Kart adaptation for the NES and the Game Boy. He just walked up and asked if he could pop it into the AVS, and sure enough, we sat there and played, and he sort of told me what he was doing, and that was just neat. Oh, and the one guy was back. He's young. He's like 13 or 12.
Yes, that dude is my hero.
He was fun to listen to and catch up with. We saw him last year.
Yeah. Always so enthusiastic.
Hey, that's what you need. You're not going to make games for old systems if you're not enthusiastic.
It's really cool seeing someone so young be interested in such an old language, though. It's really awesome.
It is. Oh, Steve DeLuca, who did the Goofy Foot, he was there.
DeLuca. Love that guy.
And yeah, and I only bring all these people up because these events are great ways to kind of meet real developers, whether they're sitting at a booth or walking around or, getting dinner afterwards. They're real people, and they're friendly, and they're nice, and yeah, if you can ever make it to a one of these conventions, some of the bigger ones or even the smaller ones. I know there's one this weekend in Syracuse, and there's a couple people there that make games, and come out and talk and meet some people. It's a good time, and it wouldn't be fun without other people.
Can I tell my PRGE story of the study hall? So, there was a booth behind us, and before the show started, this was this Friday night? Beau, we're all setting up, and Friday night's sort of the night that the people that are, manning the booths sort of can go around and scope out the deals before it's open to the public. And Beau comes up to me and he goes, "Hey man, like the guy in the booth behind us has a copy of Study Hall." And I was like, "Oh, that's really cool," because as a developer, I can't tell you how cool it is to like see something you've made like that either, someone else has or someone else is selling. Like just stumbling across one of your games is really fun. I remember, I was in Toronto, doing the NES-a-thon and seeing one of my Christmas cartridges, I think the 2012, the one that I, was actually my game, for sale in this glass case in Toronto. Is just really bizarre. Anyway, I was like, oh cool, this guy has Study Hall. So what's cool about sort of going into the public, you can gauge people's true feelings, on your games. Cause when people know you've made a game, they might be a little bit more sort of hesitant to tell you things they don't like because they don't want to hurt your feelings or whatever. So I went up to this guy and I was like, "Oh, cool. I see you have Study Hall. Can you tell me about this game?" And he just launched into sort of how much he loved it, how he was one of the first in line to pre-order it, and he was looking forward to this game for so long, and it was really cool getting someone's sort of true feelings about the game, without revealing that I was the one who made it.
You're so mean.
So that's not really mean, is it?
Well, it depends what he says.
Oh, he had nothing but good things, thankfully. I didn't want to have to murder someone in Portland. But yeah, he had lots of good things to say, and he said there was he had a friend, I guess, in Phoenix or something who was let down by the game, and I was like, "Oh, can you tell me what he didn't like?" And I don't even remember if he had a good reason for not liking it, but then, at the end of the conversation as I'm walking away, I was like, "Oh, by the way, I made that." A lot of fun.
Yeah, in Portland, a lot of these shows are fun too because they will have either exclusive releases to the show or a game will get its initial release there. And so this year there was the Cowlitz Gamer's second adventure, which was the art was done by MT, the programming was done by somebody, and it was been released by John Hancock, the immortal John Hancock, who SW11ist, who he has I think a YouTube channel. No, he does have a YouTube channel, and he raises money for the Children's Justice Advocate, if I got those in the right order. But yeah, he raises money to help kids through releasing brand new games. The Mike Tomlinson, who runs Good Deal Games, I think. He had a new Sega Genesis game. And I think there was one more exclusive one. I had no money this year, so I couldn't buy anything.
Yeah, I'm having a brain fart. I don't remember. All I remember is the Hancock games and then that Genesis game.
Oh, yeah, I guess John had the Cowlitz Gamer's first adventure and then also Tortoises, so...
Yeah, Sarah, there's some cool exclusive games to be had, and it's always, as someone, you and I, who have gone there for a few years now, the people that can't attend, they always try to sort of get us to maybe, pick up a copy or two for them. So it's always a little bit of a, not a hassle, but it's always, a little bit of fun trying to man a booth while picking up a game before it sells out. Yep, a lot of fun.
Oh, and the show itself wouldn't be possible without Rick and Toby and the third guy whose name I can never remember. They provide this wonderful space for retro gaming, and they really put a lot of emphasis and love into the homebrew side of things, and so very thankful for that.
Definitely should give them a shout out because they did put all of our games on the front page of their website a couple days before the expo opened.
That's right.
So they did give us some hype there.
John Riggs was there too. I don't know if he had a game though.
No, I asked him if he had any of his hacks there. He said he brought a couple, but he was mostly selling licensed and unlicensed stuff from his collection.
Oh, okay. Okay, so I didn't miss anybody. There's always somebody you're going to miss and forget about, and I always hate doing that. But
yeah, so if that's you, we apologize.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
We tried.
But yeah, there are shows, conventions around the country, not just Portland. MGC is a good one, the one in Milwaukee. Even little shows, like I went to Long Island a couple years ago, and there was, 3 or 4 of us sitting there like all day. You could just sit and shoot the breeze and talk and, pick up games. And
yeah, there's one here locally to me called Emerald Coast Con. I think that's going on this weekend, actually.
Oh, you're doing a panel, right?
No, that was last year, and that will never be again.
The panel nobody went to.
Good pull.
See, what else has been going on in the community? I mean, there's so much has gone on in the last 2 months. Give me a few things, and we'll try to cover the rest next episode.
Well, the one that comes to mind first, last night, Brad Smith sent out an email about Lizard, which has been in development for some time. He said that it should be shipping in December. So we'll cross our fingers there.
Very excited for that one.
Yeah, I know. That's been on your short list of homebrew, best homebrew of all time.
Well, the demo, it's just so good, but he switched one of my favorite features for the final release, so I'm like on pins and needles waiting to see if it's still going to be right there at the top for me.
I don't see how it won't be. I mean, that guy is, as just a programmer in itself, he's incredible. But some of the ideas that he's had, I know he posts some GIFs. I'm going to say GIF because that's both what I've always said and second what the creator of the format said it's supposed to be pronounced. Anyway,
what do you mean GIFs?
We won't get into that debate, but Brad has been posting some images of, just some animations from his game, and graphically, it's just a beautiful work of art, so I'm very much looking forward to that.
Music, too. The music is something I'll pop on, I think it's track 11 or so, and just listen to it for a good half hour at once. It's just great.
I know Tim, Mega Mario Man, who released Tailgate Party. He's started working on a new game. It's like an isometric. Yeah, oh yeah, that guy. Thanks, Tim. He started on a new isometric survival horror game, which looks pretty promising. People look to be pretty excited about that.
Yeah. Oh, and speaking of people fulfilling Kickstarter rewards, Collector Vision is finally releasing a couple of the projects that they had funded a couple years ago.
Oh, okay.
Justice Beaver for the Super Nintendo, and then Sydney Hunter and the Caverns of something for the Super Nintendo as well. But there'll be an NES port of that one in good time.
And I know personally, one of the things I've been looking forward to most, Sly Dog Studios, Rob, has released the Black Box Challenge, which you can buy from Infinite NES Lives. That is an incredible game, and it's a very, very big game. So I'm glad that Rob was finally able to get that one out by himself and get that out for sale. Yeah,
if you missed the Kickstarter that took place a couple years ago, this is your chance to pick up sort of the regular edition. It comes in a nice shell, uses all new parts, label, it's a game.
So what else? What have I missed here?
There have been a number of projects sort of announced or returned to in the last month or two. There was a guy making a game a few years ago who had gotten pretty far, then just disappeared. Life happens, and he's back and working on stuff. A game called Adversary. I think Doug Fracker, who made Vigilant Ninja 2, which was released. We've talked about that before. Doug F. He is working on one for the competition that's coming up in January.
He also released the soundtrack to Haunted Halloween 86.
Yeah.
I think he put it online or something.
Yeah, I think he cleaned up the music when they ran into some trouble with their music engine, and so I think he's responsible for that, if I recall, and I'm sure somebody will correct me if I'm wrong, so thank you in advance.
He will correct you, I'm sure.
Yeah. I love a good dedicated listener.
Yeah, thank you, Douglas.
Sword of Vienna, which is an MSX homebrew, is being ported also to the NES, which is always interesting to me when, like we had with Alter Ego, where either Spectrum games, MSX games, other homebrews get ported then to the NES. It's always sort of a fun process to watch.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot out there.
Oh, Action 53 Volume 3 is finally set to be, not finally, it's only been 6 months, is set to be released pretty soon. I think they're gearing up for production now that Rob's Black Box Challenge is out. That'll be through Infinite NES Lives.
Very cool. Very cool.
And of course, the Xmas 2017, which we mentioned at the beginning of the episode, is available for purchase right now on retrousb.com. It's $72. It's a steal for 9 games.
Yep, plus that LCD label.
Oh yeah, that's super cool. I think that's the only reason it costs more, too.
Yeah, for sure. Then it can actually detect, which orientation the cartridge is in. So, if you're playing it in your top loader, it, flips the label so it's facing the right direction. And if it's in the AVS or the front loader, I don't know, it's just really cool. He always seems to think of everything, and I don't understand how he does it.
That is Brian. That's just how he works.
Oh, Brian. But I know that you and I spend a lot of time in Discord chat, but it looks like they have both made this Discord chat the official chat of Nintendo Age. So there's a Nintendo Age channel, and then there's a sub-channel inside that that people have started for actual NES development talk. So if you want to join the chat and sort of hang out with other like-minded folks, either just video game related or development related, there is a link on Nintendo Age to that Discord chat, the new official chat of Nintendo Age.
Funny that that's come back as a thing, not from Nintendo Age had a chat years ago, but the beginnings of the NES homebrew community, there was IRC, which, that was a huge thing where people would talk about emulators and talk about development and just figure stuff out in real time as opposed to forums, or back then it was even a mailing list. Everybody would get those emails about a topic that they'd subscribe to. And so it's interesting to see chat is still alive and well, and that is helpful to people for getting stuff done. And so if you want to come talk with people, please do.
There's some convenience there. With this chat, you can you don't have to be there all the time. You can step away and live your life, and when you come back, you can go, scroll up and read what you've missed, and you can ask people questions, and they'll get to them when they can. I think it's a little bit more personable than a forum, because you can sort of create channels for specific topics and, invite people that you want to be there, just so there's not a lot of sort of outside noise, sort of convoluting everything. It's been fun. I like it. I'm glad that it's a thing.
One of the things that I really enjoy about it is it's a quick way to get, to explain yourself and not be misunderstood. So if you're asking about stuff and you're getting weird answers that you feel are above your head, you can quickly ask, do you mean this or this? And then it's oh no, I'm not using the right terms or explaining it the right way. So you're not even answering my question. Let's, figure that out, as opposed to, a forum post where you get 10 replies that aren't actually relevant to what you're doing.
That's kind of what I was getting at with all the convoluted noise of people chiming in.
That's what you meant. See, even right there, it's worked out in real time. It's much easier.
See, if we were in chat, that would have just gone way easier.
Vocal is even easier, but
I know, I was just teasing. But I do want to take the time right now to make an exclusive announcement. Is that okay?
Yeah, I think
it's happening right now. Dear listeners, you're the first to hear that. Drum roll. Can you give me a drum roll? No. Okay. I'm going to do a homebrew calendar for 2018.
Oh, really?
It's happening. It's happening. So, all of you developers who are listening to this podcast, if you want me to use your games for the 2018 calendar, send me a message in some way, Twitter or Nintendo Age or email or Discord chat, any way
Maybe
you
the
want.
assembly line Gmail?
Oh yeah, we do have one of those. nesassemblyline@gmail.com if you want to shoot me an email. I will be putting together this calendar in the next, couple weeks, just so we can get them printed and made before the new year. So yeah, let me know, because I need 12 games, and I'm tired of using my own. So let's do this, and you'll just have to give me a little write-up of the game and a screenshot that I can sort of blow up in nearest neighbor format so the pixel edges stay sharp. And yeah, we'll get it going. It's gonna be pretty. I just flipped my calendar over to November, and I see Brony Blaster there smiling back at me. So, yep, I'm excited to get this new calendar going. So let's do this, guys.
And you said you were never going to do another one.
Well, it's disheartening when I get, X number made and then X divided by 2 or 3 is what's actually sold. But I'm now that I have a good full-time job, I'm not doing this to make money. So we'll put it up for a really good price. A little bit, a guy's got to pay his bills.
I think you're just trying not to lose money at this point. But hey, whatever it takes for you to get that thing out. I was really sad when you said you weren't going to do any more.
Well, I'm dramatic with these things. I always say that I'm retiring from programming too, and it never seems to happen.
Geez,
so.
it doesn't even worry me when you say that anymore.
Like the boy who cried wolf.
The first couple times I was like, oh no, what am I going to do? And then ever since then, it's like, yeah, okay, Kevin, sure. Get back to me.
Yeah, whatever, Kevin. Yep, so that's happening. I'm excited.
Well, cool. And I guess we have some music, right?
Yeah, we have some music. I'm going to use Brad Smith, who's just finishing up Blizzard right now. He has actually transcribed Pink Floyd's entire Dark Side of the Moon album as if it were written on the NES, and he did a really good job with it, so I wanted to feature one of the songs from that just to sort of get it some more exposure, even though I'm sure most people know about it by now. But if you don't, you can go to his website, rainwarrior.ca. And there's a page set up there that you can check out the information of, why he wrote it, when he wrote it, and you can download, an NES file or an NSF if you want to listen to it. But he's also linked it to some YouTube videos that he has of each song up. So if you want to go there and check it out. But the song I want to feature is called Brain Damage, and it is from toward the end of the Dark Side of the Moon. But if you're familiar with the album, you will recognize it right away. And if not, I definitely encourage you to check it out. But regardless, here is Brad Smith's version. See you guys next time. Thanks. Bye.